Network Entertainment.
They say that grief is love with nowhere to go. The world's moving reaction to Pope Francis's passing says as much. We loved him very much, didn't we? This is Pia and the Pope, reflections on faith, legacy, and a successor, presented by Voices at the Pod. I'm Pia Ontiveros. In this opening episode, we'll talk about my personal experience covering Pope Francis as a journalist. When someone like Francis is chosen as Pope and exceeds expectations, who went after the last, the least, and the lost, who preached and practiced that the church should be a field hospital, who told us that what it meant to be Catholic is to go to the peripheries, to be a servant leader, to be a shepherd, and then leaves us all too soon. There is a big, gaping hole in our hearts filled with sorrow and loss. Growing up Catholic is a core childhood memory for me. I was baptized Catholic by an uncle who, like Pope Francis, was a Jesuit, my dad's older brother. His name was Father Eduardo Ontiveros, who composed hundreds of mass songs like Pananagutan, Ama Namin, Ang Puso Ko'y Nagpupuri, Paghandog ng Sarili, Liwanag ng Aming Puso, Kahanga-hanga. The same songs we sang in the masses Tito Eddie would celebrate for us in family reunions. But there were even more perks of having a priest in the family. When there were communion hosts that were not consumed and not blessed, Tito Eddie would hand them out to us, his little nephews and nieces, so that we could snack on them. Needless to say, they were heavenly. Holy Week in quiet Manila were spent watching reruns of old movies like The Robe or Jesus of Nazareth, attending Easter Vigil masses and Easter egg hunts. I was educated in Catholic schools. It was at St. Scholastica's College, Manila, for grade school and high school, run by the Benedictine nuns. There was First Holy Communion in the second grade. For a school play once, the role I was given was that of a pope, Gregory the Great. Needless to say, I wasn't too happy about it because I did want to be Mama Mary or an angel, but oh well, who wouldn't mind being Pope for a day? For some reason, religion was always a favorite subject, and Ora et Labora was our school motto. And then for college, I went to the Jesuit-run Ateneo de Manila University, where theology and philosophy were core subjects. Ignatian spirituality, prayer of discernment, man for others, ad maiorem Dei gloriam. I viewed my faith as a very personal, very deep relationship with a very compassionate, comforting God on whose lap I could sit and who made my troubles disappear. The same thought in this poem I wrote in my freshman year, God sitting on the acacia tree, the same tree that still stands today in the college quadrangle. As a journalist, I would specialize in certain coverages, one of them, anything to do with the Catholic Church here and abroad, the Vatican, and the Pope. We did not have a church or religious beat in the newsrooms where I worked, but I just naturally gravitated to stories like those. Or they found their way to me. It was like fish taking to water. In 2005, I co-anchored breaking news coverage of the conclave that elected Pope Benedict XVI after Pope John Paul II's death. As in all my shows, coverages, stories, and interviews, I went full blast on preparation. And one of the things I made sure I knew were the Latin names of the cardinal electors. Some 2 hours after white smoke billowed from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel, the senior cardinal deacon announced on that famous balcony on which all popes make their first appearance, Annuncio vobis gaudium magnum, abemus papam, eminentissimum, I hope I got my Latin correct, ac reverendissimum domimum domimum. And then he says the new pope's baptismal name in Latin, Josephum. And then I shout, oh my God, it's Ratzinger. And my co-anchor at the time, Tony Velasquez, says, how do you know that? And I explain as fast as I can, because Josephum in Latin is Latin for Joseph, and he's the only cardinal whose first name is Joseph. And he was a front runner anyway. And the cardinal deacon had by then said, Sancte Romane Ecclesiae Cardinalem, and then the surname Ratzinger, qui sibi nomem imposuit. Benedict XVI, the name he chose, Benedict XVI. And then Benedict emerges on the balcony. He is Pope for 8 years, until he retires due to poor health in 2013, a first in papal history. And then Jorge Mario Cardinal Bergoglio is chosen as his successor and is transformed into our beloved Pope Francis. So we all know what Advent is. It's those 4 weeks before a favorite season of the year, Christmas. But I think you will agree that there are also Advents in our lives. One waits so long for something that one thinks it will never come. Think of something that you wanted or waited for far too long, or somewhere in your life you wished you could be. Think of a time in your life that you were waiting for what God will give you, for what you yearn for, and then it comes and it is given to you. The waiting then becomes more beautiful because there is grace in the opposite of instant gratification. There is grace in waiting. No matter how long or short the Advent is, eventually God grants us not necessarily exactly what we want, but more than we can ever imagine. So in that moment of grace, we can say to ourselves, it took me so long to get here, but I'm here. Because everything, I believe, everything in God's good time. Whether it is being reunited with a long-lost close relative, patching up with an old friend, finally getting to build your own home, or even getting to set foot in Rome, in St. Peter's Square, and inside the Basilica, and meeting the Pope, the Supreme Pontiff, the Vicar of Christ, the leader of the 1 billion plus strong Roman Catholic Church I was baptized into. The last was a gift I was granted in January 2015. Before that, in November, I was told we would spend 2 weeks in January traveling with the Pope for his apostolic journey to Sri Lanka and my home country, the Philippines. On the papal plane, flying with the Pope from Rome to Colombo to Manila to Tacloban, back to Manila, and then back to Rome. And we were told, no, you're not going to wait for him here in Manila. You need to fly to Rome to pick him up. Parang susunduin nyo. And after the trip here to the Philippines, they said, no, you don't say goodbye to him at the airport and stay behind in Manila. You fly back to Rome with him. Parang ihahatid ninyo siya pauwi. Ganon. Now, the Vatican had given special permission because there are no Filipino journalists accredited at the Vatican for a select group of us to fly to Rome so that we could be on the papal flights and cover Pope Francis just the way the Vatican Accredited Media Personnel, or VAMP, journalists cover him. No other Catholic country which the Pope would visit had ever been given that privilege.
Hi, my name is RJ Ledesma. I wear many hats. I wish I had just as many heads. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I'm also an entrepreneur mentor. I'd like to invite all of you to please listen to the RJ Ledesma podcast. On my podcast, I listen to inspiring business leaders and entrepreneurs to learn more about how they think about doing business, what are their success secrets, and how we can replicate them, and more importantly, what business opportunities do they see emerging in the near future for us entrepreneurs. Listen to the RJ Ledesma podcast.
The preparations began in earnest. There were earthly matters to take care of, syempre. Mga visa applications, packing, arranging for me to be away from my kids and my household, and the preparation I usually do for a big coverage. And then there was the CBCP recollection in December that Cardinal Chito Tagle gave for us Vamp Pinoys. Yes, Cardinal Chito, the one they would call the Asian Pope Francis. Cardinal Chito spoke about Advent, preparation, waiting. How could anyone not be moved? As the recollection ended, I greeted Ambassador Tita de Villa. Through my tears, I told her how happy I was that I was going. And all she said was, Pia, you were chosen. Chosen to go on a journey unlike any other, with a pope unlike any other. It was a pilgrimage of the soul and of the spirit. On the flight from Rome to Colombo, as is customary for Pope Francis, he comes to the back of the plane where we journalists are seated to say hello to each and every one of us. It would be my first time to meet him. I was frazzled. I was trying to come up with something great to say, but my mind had gone blank. I just couldn't think of anything. I gazed down at my carry-on bag and realized that I could have him bless the 36 rosaries I bought just outside St. Peter's Square. I didn't say much. He shook my hand, smiled at me, and blessed the rosaries. And this is mine. Here. And I'm so sure that those I gave the rest of the rosaries to still treasure them to this day. Now, I did say earlier that it was going to be a journey unlike any other, but that doesn't even begin to describe it all. The arrival to the warmest of welcomes at Villamore Air Base in the late afternoon of January 15, 2015, the welcome ceremony at Malacanang the next morning, Mass at the Manila Cathedral afterwards, and a meeting with families at the Mall of Asia Arena. And then there was Tacloban, which had been devastated by Super Typhoon Yolanda a year and a half before. The Pope had made a promise to be with those who suffered, and he had every intention of keeping it. Kulang na lang sabihin niya, "No way are you going to keep me from going to Tacloban." It was meant to be a short day trip, but it got even shorter. A storm was brewing there, and the pilots were worried. But they allowed the flight on one condition, that we would cut the schedule down by a few hours. You could almost feel Francis's willpower propelling the plane forward and steering us through the turbulence, the wind, and the rain. I remember what it was like to see the thousands waiting in the rain, wind, and cold in Tacloban, waiting, just waiting for Francis, and the way the joy shone on their faces when he was finally among them. You know what children look like when they're waiting for their parents to pick them up in school? The look of worry and anxiety etched on their faces, and when their parents finally show up, their faces break into relief and happiness. How do you describe that which is indescribable? The Pope's homily could be summarized in this simple message. These two words, "I'm here," he said. And he said those words to people standing in the rain, soaked to the skin, tears either welling up in their eyes or rolling down their cheeks, because the essence of Pope Francis is to be with you. How do you make someone feel that you understand him? By just being with him. You don't need so many words to say this most powerful of two words, "I'm here." So we were rushing from event to event, from place to place, and finally we motored back to the airport. The drivers went so fast because we had a plane that wasn't going to wait for us. As we arrived at the airport, all of us, lahat kaming journalists, takbo sa aeroplano. Clambering up the plane with all our equipment, running to our seats, plopping down and putting on our seatbelts in 3 seconds, knowing the storm was right behind us. We were supposed to take off at 1 p.m. sharp. We took off at 1:04 p.m. The storm was literally on our tail, but a most precious cargo was on board, Pope Francis. So back in Manila the next morning, a visit to the University of Santo Tomas, and then the Mass at the Luneta. Everywhere he went, everyone waited for him, like children waiting for their Papa Francesco. And then came the day that it was time to leave, January 19. How do you describe a send-off where no one wanted him to leave? Some even hoping that he'd lose his boarding pass. Shepherd 1 was PAL's special flight to bring Papa Francesco and all of us home to Rome. And on that flight, the most unexpected happened. Us Filipino journalists were told we would have 5 minutes to sit with the Pope at the front of the plane. We were discouraged from bringing our cell phones and told to just be in the moment because Vatican photographers would take care of taking pictures. And they were right. Those 5 minutes didn't feel at all like just 5 minutes. I showed Pope Francis a photo of my family. He laughed and said, "I have so many children, only 4. I asked for his blessing and I asked for one last thing. May I ask for an embrace? I said. He smiled and said, "See." For those who know me, an embrace or a hug means more than anything in the world to me. Embracing Pope Francis felt like embracing a cloud, a marshmallow, a big, fat, plump, white marshmallow. All my cares, all my worries melting away into the softest of pillows. It felt like God on that acacia tree back in college all over again. It felt just like all those times I imagined myself sitting on God's lap as a little girl. It felt like a little bit of heaven on God's good earth. And that is why, as journalist, Filipino and Catholic, being on that journey with Pope Francis was not just a story to me. It was not just an opportunity, but a blessing. It was not just a coverage, but a pilgrimage, a real journey. It was a road to Damascus. It was a wing on a prayer. It was a window to our souls. It was proof that God's plans are not ours. Proof that God prepares you for what he will give you. Proof that there is grace in waiting. In our next episode, we take a closer look at the extraordinary leadership of Pope Francis, his legacy, and the profound changes he has brought to the Catholic Church. Thanks for joining this conversation. Once again, I'm Pia Ontiveros, and this has been Voices at the Pod, Pia and the Pope, a journey with Pope Francis.
The opinions of podcast creators, hosts, and guests are not necessarily reflective of the official stance of the Pod Network Entertainment, its hosts, or other network programs. The content created by the people behind the podcast is personal and not meant to harm any religion, ethnicity, group, organization, company, or individual.